Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast, where you subscribe for weekly videos exploring deeper knowledge of the universe and yourself. We are joined yet again by Sean Black, the Norse Pagan Shaman, and we're going to be concluding this three-part segment. As an overview, we're looking at essentially what it means to be a Norse Pagan Shaman in the modern world. We looked at the historical, the past, and what's led up to. And then in the last one, we looked at the kind of the present day, where that meets the modern day, and how to kind of acquiesce those things together. And in this final piece, we're going to be looking at the future aspect, where we see things moving, what we ought to be really putting our energy towards most effectively. And so, more or less, Sean, if you want to take that, let's start with, say, what do you think is kind of that turning point? Because that's really where we're at, is, we're starting to see that parabolic rise. And
right.
Really, it's still kind of unwritten. It could go either way, to be perfectly honest. We're not necessarily trying to sell too much, unicorns and leprechauns and all that kind of stuff,
Right. Yeah.
So,
this, well, if we look at our most recent history, we can sort of recognize that there's a couple of mistakes we can make. This whole thing can become a short cycle, just like the sort of hippie 1960s revolution where it was short cycled, we can look at that possibility. We can learn from some of the mistakes that were made there and not make some of those mistakes. And we were talking about the idea of attraction rather than promotion as one of the ways to avoid some of those mistakes in our last episode. And the thing from a shaman's perspective, regardless of what culture you're coming from, the emergence of shaman is actually becoming more prevalent. And part of the reason for that is because the folk soul is demanding it. There's a tie that we haven't really talked about between the folk soul and the shaman, and the necessity when the folk soul demands change, shamans show up. And there's plenty of historic examples where, like, Stalin wiped out a bunch of shaman from particular cultures, and 20 years later they showed back up out of nowhere without any continuity of the tradition, but they learned it. They figured it out. And they had influence because they had developed that connection to their ancestors and the connection to animism, which facilitated the development of what that folk soul needed in order to express itself. Okay. And from our Northern European folks are experiencing this right now. And it's written about in the Hopi prophecy as well. So from my perspective as a shaman, what I got to recognize is that the folk soul has demanded that shaman return. So one of the things I got to do is turn into what we used to call in the military a combat multiplier. I have to create more shaman, responsible, effective guys that can develop results. Okay, that can actually keep this ball rolling. The inertia that has been broken by the folk soul demands a continuity and an increase in velocity. Right, it's got to keep moving. So I got to teach folks what I know and give them the opportunities to develop themselves into whatever kind of version the folk soul will demand of them. So looking into the future, and the future of our people, we got to get healthy and independent and strong of mind, body, and spirit, from my perspective. So like I said before, my consideration with regard to all this is the individual first, because strong individuals will make strong families, then the family, because strong families will make strong kindreds because they will make strong clans and tribes. And all of the work that these guys are doing to develop, like national communities or regional communities and stuff like that, what I'm doing supports that from the bottom up. And because we can't make national groups or regional groups out of essentially straw heathens, right? Or plagans, play pagans, there's a lot of, I mean, and I hate to use, I really don't, I'm just joking around with that. I don't really call people names like that, but I'm just saying that, the real thing is we have to develop this strength and we have to continue this momentum. And it's going to take some sort of social triage. In other words, we can't do this for everybody. We really need to take the strongest and the smartest and the fastest and get them integrated into the program, according to their will. We can't take, we're not at a point where we have the luxury to educate people on the basic communication and logic things that they should be learning as the trivium, the very basic things that they have to do. I know it's funny, but it's serious, man. If you get on social media and some other places, we're talking about people that are barely functional in their native language, right? And there's a place for everybody. I'm not saying that you have to be. It's not some kind of elitist thing, and it has nothing to do with ego at all. It's just a basic understanding of some basic skills that have to be there in order for us to rebuild.
Yeah, you're just seeing it as it truly is, and that by its nature, it's natural to have judgments about things. That's our way of navigating the reality field. And you were just talking about the trivium, and when you mentioned, that reminded me when you mentioned the mini revolution of, like, say, the 60s or something.
Yeah,
that's why that fizzled out, because they weren't applying the trivium. They weren't really getting at the root causes of the problem. They could see the problem. That's always the easy part. You can see shit's fucked up. It's happening all over the place.
Right.
The question is why, and getting into the causal factors of what is occurring so that you're empowered to change the trajectory of that. And the biggest problem, say, with the hippie movement of the 60s, for example, is, in my opinion, until we really start honestly and deeply acknowledging government and religion, specifically monotheistic, but really any kind of dogmatic belief system in general, which government actually falls into that itself.
It does at this point, certainly.
You are never going to get at those root causes, because those are essentially the biggest causes by a landslide of any other plight that is troubling humanity at this time. Like, it makes all the other problems that we're looking at look like a walk in the park, essentially.
And the reason that that's happening is because we don't understand how to, as a culture, we don't understand as individuals how to engage in logic, reason, communication, grammar. We don't understand them. I mean, we got people that are using the wrong words for every fucking thing, and enough of them start to use it, and that becomes the understood connotative definition of a word that denotatively means nothing of the sort. So we're undermining our own ability to communicate by not engaging in some basic rules because we want to be fucking rebels or something. I don't understand. Maybe that's off track, but that's what it seems like to me. Hijacking the language, hijacking, like use of the word warrior and use of the word combat and all kinds of other shit. And as a veteran, I get that a lot. Well, I'm in a war with cancer. Well, I've had cancer and I've been in combat, and I can tell you that they're not the same fucking thing at all.
Right.
Not even close. All right.
Well, like, to quote the Buddha, there's only two mistakes one can make on the path to truth. One is not to begin, and the other is not going all the way. And so essentially, what you see a lot of the times is, people that can even just get as far as recognizing the problem, and that's a good start, but then they just kind of like half-ass it, or they'll come up with some way to just justify it in their own heads of, I'm helping, like that Nelson meme, I'm helping.
Right.
But they really ain't doing jack shit. In reality, they're not doing anything to actually change things, and it's all just an ego validation game that they're playing so that they feel like they're not partly responsible.
Yeah. Now here's the trap that a lot of people are falling into these days. Okay. And this isn't specific to young people. I've noticed this across all different varieties of age ranges. And the problem is that they're engaging in a social media expression protest or
Right.
they're taking on these big fucking unbelievably complicated problems, and they're assuming that they can, like I said before, they're assuming that they can solve these problems, highly complicated social structural issues, okay, and they're being enticed into engaging that with their energy instead of engaging in self-improvement. You got guys, really brilliant guys out here that have noticed the same thing that I have, guys like Jordan Peterson and some of these other folks, and they're like, you cannot fix these problems until you understand how to fix lesser problems, until you understand how to develop yourself. So how do we develop ourselves when we don't have any guidance? Well, some of us got to step back, and this is largely what shamanism is about in the current day and age, at least as I define it, is stepping back and showing people how to empower themselves. What are the steps? What are the things that you need to do to get your brain out from under the thumb of social media, of politics and all these other things that are taking all your energy away? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's the same shit that the Romans were doing, and the same shit they've been doing for a couple thousand years, and that is providing bread and circus. Or the modern alternative to that is Coors Light and football, or whatever the fucking distraction is. These things take away our time and our vital essence. And walking away from that shit and taking seriously your commitment to yourself to develop into a whole human, okay, and then develop your family into something that can be whole. These are the things that we need to focus on now, so that the future generations aren't continuing to go downhill into this downward spiral of illusion.
Mm. Yeah, I'm going to be a word nerd again.
Yeah.
Like that. So the word circus means circular, and it keeps you trapped on the hamster wheel of
Yes.
we're talking about revolutions, and then now circus, which is literally Latin for circle, and they even have the Ringling Brothers. I mean, I'm not a coincidence theorist.
Right.
I think there's maybe something to that, but anyway, bit of a side tangent.
Right. So
no, go ahead. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. So I guess really where we can see things going in the future as a way to continue to drive things forward and keep this momentum. Mm-hmm. What was really coming up for me is it comes down to reconnecting. Definitely. And it starts with the reconnecting with ourselves, mm-hmm. and our ancestral lineage, like healing through that, tapping into the epigenetic memory, as we talked about in the previous segments, but then continuing to take that and expand that into your personal relationships, your friendships, your family, your, mm-hmm. Your kin, your community, and then it expands outwards. But you have to do that as an individual, and no one person is going to be the savior for everybody. And I really think that I call that savior projection, and it comes from monotheism. Like I like to say, like, I'm not your savior, and I don't fucking want to be.
Right.
Like, I'll walk with you. I'm not going to carry you on my back, but I'll walk with you. Like, I'll point you in the right direction to the same information that I came across to help empower myself, and then let you draw your own conclusions. Mm-hmm. But it's always going to be up to you and how much effort you're willing to put into it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Another play on words that I came up with is, if you want a savior, you better save yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's the only one, you're the only one responsible for you.
Right.
And then it's ironic. I mean, like, how blatant it is, the programming in, say, like the Christian iconography of, the shepherd and his flock and all that stuff. And they literally pridefully refer themselves as his flock. A bunch of sheep.
Flock that.
Yeah, flock that sheep. Yeah, exactly.
Well, one of the things that they fail to recognize about the relationship between the shepherd and the sheep is that, who shears and eats who? Mm-hmm. They're not.
Right, and I mean, it's like, is the shepherd really caring for those sheep out of the kindness of his heart, or is he just protecting his assets?
Uh-huh.
Right.
Well,
and that's the thing. Yeah.
And if we understand government and Yahweh both as egregores, that are starving for power because the only power that they get is from living, existing things, because they don't actually exist and never have, right? As egregores. And government's a reasonable egregore. You know, it's a self-aware consciousness that never had a real tangible existence before and still doesn't. Same with Yahweh. No real tangible existence ever. So the only way that they can live within this reality, since they were not born here, and they have no birthright like every other thing that's here, right? Since they don't have that birthright, the only way that they can actually survive is as parasites, with the donation of power from the people who don't realize that they don't exist.
That's why it's a mind virus. Point to the government for me. Show me where the government is. Show me where Yahweh is. Can you point it out? Like, can you show me on a map? Or no, it's here. In the Matrix, the movie The Matrix, the agents come through the average citizens. That guy just walking through the train station.
Oh yeah,
has no idea, and all of a sudden the program activates and they become the agent. That is exactly what is occurring right there.
And there's there's so many perfect examples of that throughout our society. Like if you go to Midwest somewhere and you're walking around, okay, what you're going to see is uniforms. Okay, now they don't look like uniforms at first. Like,
oh my God!
Right.
So just as an aside, we're talking so much about this like homogenization and uniform, one form, like all the same.
Right?
Yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to
no, that's fucking brilliant, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. But you've got the ball cap, the t-shirt, the jeans, and the fucking running shoes or whatever. Even though that guy hasn't run since he was in junior high or something, right? Okay, this is the uniform, all right. Yeah. And if I walk down the street in a fucking kilt, right, what do you think's going to happen? I've done this. What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah, I'm not look at you.
I'm not. And I recognize that look because when I was in the Army and I was not in the proper uniform, guys would look at me like this on post. They would be like, "Fuck, you can't do that." They don't say anything necessarily, right? They don't say anything necessarily, but you can see it and you can feel it. They're like, and they're like, they're trying, because they spend so much time enforcing their uniform that they have been taught, indoctrinated into. Okay. And you see the same thing. It's a lot worse for women. Okay. Their uniformity is like unbelievably, and they empower it. They not empower it. They police themselves.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They have no authority to do so. Right. But they do it. And so you've got this self-policing environment. And what you got to recognize is that is not getting weaker. That is getting stronger. So as future moves, as further generations and what we need to set up for ourselves for them, is one of the perfect examples of that is just teaching them to break the fucking uniform occasionally and experiment with their reality. Get out of the cities, get into places where people aren't imposing that kind of bullshit on you,
Right.
And
let them see that when you do that, the whole, like, the sky's not going to fall on your head.
Exactly.
I think you hit on something really big there in the context of how the programming can be very, very strong women and they police themselves, and how important that is for any type of control system to get control of the mindset of women specifically, because women have a lot of power and influence. Not only do they have power and influence over their spouse and their husband, but they have a lot of the influence over raising children. And if whoever owns the youth owns the future, right? So, if you can do that, I actually have, I'll grab it really quick here, but there's a really great book that I've been delving into called Hitler's Furies by Wendy Lower here. And this is the story of women in the Nazi killing fields. A lot of people, when they think of the atrocities that went on, they only think of men doing these things, when they're actually women doing them too. And, even if it's just, there could be them pulling the trigger, or it could be filing the paperwork to ship this load of people here. It's still participating in it. And that for these things to happen in society, that the women absolutely, their mind state absolutely has to be controlled. And it's that harnessing of the feminine energy, that creative force. So if you're wanting to create something new, you have to harness that force and twist it in the way that you want to. very excellent point to hit on there.
Yeah,
I think
powerful, dude.
you know.
Wow.
Well, let me clue you guys into something that you may not be aware of. However strong you think that indoctrination was for the examples all the way across the board of Nazi Germany, 1930s to 1940s, right?
Yeah.
No matter how strong you think that is, if you take an objective lens and look at America right now, you are going to see 10 times that level.
Oh yeah, even worse. Yeah, definitely.
So it's always funny to me because when you use those when you use any part of Nazi Germany or the Third Reich at all in any kind of context like this, people, their indoctrination makes them go, like that's the epitome of how fucked up things are. No, motherfuckers, it's not. Look around right now, we've got
or even with even just back in the same time period, looking at what went on in Russia or whatever. I just happen to use that example because this is book I'm delving into at the time.
No, and that's totally legitimate. I mean, you could use Stalin, you could use Mao, you could use any of those examples, but any of those other examples, they all have this in common. The levels of indoctrination back then, what was happening in those cultures, is very much the same thing that's happening in our country cultures. But it's way stronger because our tools are the tools that are being used against us are much stronger. And that's one of the things that we have to face in the future is that this indoctrination is not going to get easier to deal with. It's going to get harder to deal with, And if we do things like allow our children to spend 12 hours in front of a screen or more a day, if we continue to not know how to feed them correctly so that their brains can function right, if we keep subjecting them to all of the fucking toxicity that we are right now, things are not going to get easier for us. They're going to get easier for the control factors that are going to be placed on these kids because they will not have the physiology to have independent thought.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, well, and I think, you can definitely see that play out, especially with a lot of the younger generation and the context of the ideas, especially with those we could say and we can see it across the board, but especially like in a lot of those that are left leaning, like you get the burn victims. It's like common things like, but the idea that, and it's just this, they hear this idea and then all of a sudden they latch onto it. And because they look around and they can at least recognize that things are, and they're not in the correct state. They're not in a natural state of being. They can at least recognize that. So then they have this urge to want to be a savior because it's coming out of trauma and everything. So the way they go about addressing those problems is totally wrong, but it's meant to be that way because what you're doing is you're setting up the problem. You're getting them triggered. You're creating a huge amount of emotional charge and energy, and then you're harnessing it and directing it towards your means.
It's called marketing.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's, something that you can very much see with those that kind of fall into that category. It's very, very easy to stir up their psychological and emotional energy and get them triggered or to send them on some cause or whatever without it even being based in reality at all. It's just, the stuff that comes out is just crazier and crazier, but it's working. Yeah. And they're buying it.
Yeah, they are. Well, I want to throw something out to you here, okay? Because there have been various different, we look back at genetics and we're going to see bottlenecks during a variety of different times, natural disasters and that sort of thing throughout human history, right? Which is, as we know it today, probably about 45,000 years. Some would say 450,000 years, and maybe that's accurate too, although the evidence is a little bit more difficult to accumulate there. Yeah. But at any rate, what I can't help but thinking that what we're experiencing right here is a natural, possibly genetic divergence, okay? And our actions right now are going to be very, very critical to what happens to our species in the future. Here's what we've got. For those of us that have the responsibility and the foresight to continue to make strong families, because of the nature of the way things are going, we've got more people just falling into abject slavery by way of social, the things that we've been talking about, the mind, body, and spirit poisoning, right? So that means that the 1% is actually going to have to grow. It's going to have to turn into more like 2 or 3% in order to manage the 98% of the slaves that are potentially coming to fruition, right? So there has to be a point where we got to look around and say, am I going to answer to my ancestors for having let my progeny slip into that slave category? Or are we going to move into the maybe 5 or even 6% that is sort of responsible for maintaining all this stuff and being and having an influence on our future? And this is not an elitist perspective. This is just really a matter of observation. So there's going to be a divergence, and it's going to be, 1,000 years from now, it may be even a subset of the species difference, because one side of our species is so poisoned that they don't even resemble what we used to be, and the other side will have either, it's like natural selection. The other side will have figured out how to not poison themselves and survive.
Right. I mean, it's definitely a lot of evidence of that now that you can see. Like people like us, we only continue to grow in our power, our self-actualization, and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, when you leave your little bubble and you go out into the everyday streets, you see where most people are at. It's quite appalling.
It is.
That's just the unfortunate truth of the matter.
And it is unfortunate, it's but it's a realization of a lot of the dreams that we were sold that are actually bullshit, And it's important to decide as an individual what side of that you're going to go on and actually take this kind of seriously. And, there are a lot of people out there that are, and this sort of embracing this dynamic of improved consciousness is key to that. Because if you can't, your whole life experience is basically the sum of your perception, right? In some ways, the sum of your perception, right? So if your ability to perceive is diminished because you don't know any better, then your life, then the mass of your consciousness is limited, right? Now, we become more, and if we're talking about something like apotheosis, right, we're moving towards increasing the mass of our consciousness through every lifetime to the extent that hopefully we can get to a large enough mass of consciousness where we can remember the rest of the lifetimes behind us. And that is the key to immortality. This is what we need to be teaching our kids. If we look at the story of Odin, one of the things that he was concerned about was Hugin and Munin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thought and memory. He was worried that thought would not return, but he was even more worried that memory wouldn't. And the reason is because memory is key to immortality, right? So because if you're immortal, but you can't remember yesterday, what good is it to be immortal?
Yeah. Isn't that
right?
Wouldn't that relate to, what is it, K2?
Rahu and K2,
Rahu.
So like the north node and the south node of the moon. Exactly. Like K2 represents what you've already mastered in context, and Rahu represents your desires, what you're wanting to move towards and driving towards. And these are the 2-4 switch in astrology. The moon represents the mind. So it's the mind of where the mind has been, what is mastered, and what is moving forward towards with the different nodes. But something that I thought, was interesting when we're talking about the future where species could potentially go, and that there could be very much this split happening, which I do think there's some evidence to see this. Why that is because the universe principle that's always there is that there's free will. And some people are just not always going to choose. You can't, even if you would love for every single person out there to get it, that's just not going to fucking happen. And you don't have the right to make that choice for them. Like it's their experience that they have to make that free will choice too. Are they going to invest and empower themselves? Or are they just going to continue to just be a sloth and just kind of go through life hoping, somebody else is going to come around and like carry them around. And that done over generations and generations. that produces results.
The reality of that whole thing has always existed. The difference is that maturity and wisdom allow us to recognize that painful truth has always really been here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people out there that like to say that they misunderstand a few things that were taught to us. Okay, they change the definition along the way somewhere, and they're saying things like we're all equal. We're not even fucking close to equal. Not even remotely close to equal. And that's just within our own species. Now, we
equal
have
in rights, but not in the forms we take, our abilities, our talents, our intelligence. Your rights are your birth rights. They're yours, and it's like you might not be claiming proper ownership because that's what sovereignty and stewardship is all about. But they were always your rights. It's just that you hadn't fully actualized.
The people who have actualized, the people who have recognized them and sort of enforced them in their own life, and that's really hard to quantify. But it's a legitimate thing to say that they probably have equal rights. That's cool. But as far as abilities and direction and all those other things, we're not even close to being equal. And a lot of people out there that are playing that game, like I'm equal to you, even though I'm equal to you and all the way across the board. And it's this weird entitlement kind of thing, and that's not helpful.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, you could look at the great divide of men and women, for example. That's one of the biggest issues we're facing right now currently, in that would be a perfect depiction of saying that men are equal in rights to women is not the same as saying men and women are the same.
Totally.
Nor should they. It's a the difference is fundamental, and that's the core of our power, that masculine and feminine energy. Without that, you can't. It's like a battery. You can't have a battery without the two polarities. But and I also I wanted to throw this in there because I'd already made one Matrix reference before. This would tie in nicely. That remember in the films as the trilogy is playing out, the stronger Neo becomes, the stronger Smith becomes, because he's like he's on the other side of the equal sign of that equation that's balancing out and bring that in. So that divergence that's occurring right now is kind of playing out in that sort of same way.
Yeah, I would say.
And in what happens at the end of the movies, well, they have this giant epic battle. So we'll see how that goes. But so just to kind of tie everything together, Sean, how can I put this? What do you see as the most important things to focus on as far as moving into this new paradigm, moving forward with we've covered the basic knowledge of where we've come from, where we are at now, and then now really tie that all together of moving forward of how we can focus on collaboration, cooperation, organization. And as a military man, you definitely understand that and the importance of that. I'd love to hear your take on that.
The most important thing that I can do is become an ancestor worthy of remembering.
Damn. That's powerful.
Short and sweet. I like it. I like that. It's good. Well said.
If more of us did that, we'd be setting up our progeny for a much higher degree of forward momentum. And so that's by example. That's the most important thing, because that means that I'm actually doing it. I'm walking the walk that I'm talking, and leading by example, and leaving a legacy that is worthy of just being remembered,
Right.
The more of us that do that, we could have 15, 30, 150 brand new sagas about our lives that would motivate and improve the lives of people we don't even know.
Wow. That's true.
That's the most important thing we can do.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, our lives is just a blip on the map. It's just a little puff of smoke, and then that's it. So regardless of what ends up in the grand scheme of things, the only thing that really should matter to you is how will you go down in history? Which side of the truth did you stand on when it all went down? Which that's what's happening right now. Shit is going down. If you're not even aware of that, you better wake up, because like the time is now. Like, it's happening.
Yeah, that's a fact. You know, beyond that, for me personally, and not everybody has this option, but for me personally, if I can be a point of access to future consciousnesses where they can access me directly and others who are doing what we're doing directly, if I can increase the mass of my consciousness to the point that they have access to it, and that what we did here and the things that we're doing that are improving other people's consciousness never get forgotten and live on in the blood, like the shaman of my ancestry that I call upon and that are teaching me, you know, that would be maybe the epitome of this particular ek, or this particular lifetime for me. That would be, if I could accomplish that, I would be impressed.
Yeah.
Hopefully that, you know, I think that's probably something that can be done. You know what I'm saying? But it would be much better if more people did it. It would be much better if these sagas and these histories and these stories lived on in our blood, and we had the ability to give our progeny the skills to have access to this, you know?
Right.
That would just fucking...
Well, what's striking me in the moment is like, ultimately this is a numbers game. And, you know, we talked before about, you know, like not being like, what's that you said about like your Captain Save-A-Ho, like that. I love that. You know, you don't necessarily have to do that, but even among leaders, there's still so much kind of tendency to just sort of go with the flow and go with what is the path of least resistance. So even if there's a 0.1% of people that are paving those new tributaries of options and showing people that there is another way, there are other ways, there are alternatives, then that small little pocket at the top will see that and start moving, and then it all cascades from there. So I recently attended Anarchadelphia. It's a, you know, freedom conference in Philly a few weeks back, and one of the speakers in particular, Derek Brose, was talking about some things that I thought was really interesting in context of in the climate of censorship, which we touched on a little bit before.
Yeah.
And how, I mean, that is really like a major fucking problem that we have to face. And, you know, like you guys out there, you're watching us on YouTube right now. Well, this platform could be shut down like that.
Oh yeah.
And you know, we're trying to take actions to like diversify a little bit. You know, we're still kind of trying to get going. We'll be on more platforms very soon, but Brian and I are definitely, we have a lot on our plates right now. So all in due time. But that being said, he said that basically navigating that, the old way will be the new way. It's going to move back to the communities, like contacting, interacting with your communities, building strong personal bonds.
Yep.
And that's so much more powerful, even though it's not quite as massive in the numbers game, essentially, but what you are cultivating is going to be so much stronger than that. And if we get enough people doing that, then it won't seem like such a daunting task.
It compounds.
It compounds. Yes.
It's like interest. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like that drop. Yes. It's like that drop in a lake, that one tiny little point that made a ripple, and then the waves like go out all the way to the edge of the lake.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's kind of the premise of what I spoke about before with regard to my priority of direction and, you know, priority of energetic flow, because you have, and the same model works for like national politics and all that kind of shit, right? National politics is really the entertainment division of the banking industry. So it's like, that's fucking totally pointless. There's all these people that I know that claim to be involved in politics and stuff, and they're gravitating towards national politics. And I'm like, you guys are drinking the Kool-Aid. Who's your mayor? Who's your local representative? Who's running the town you live in? Who's running the township or the county? Who's your sheriff? They don't know any of those fucking things, but they know all about whatever the current election bullshit is that has absolutely nothing to do with them, right? Well, same kind of thing with our other kinds of ways of organizing, like organizing within our spirituality and our self-improvement and those kinds of things. Those bonds of the people who know you and see you face to face, those are the bonds that are worth really developing, you know? Now, some of us, obviously, there's always going to be exceptions to that. And there's people all over the place. Like, I've got a lot of really, really strong, powerful people that are students of mine or working with me or whatever. That's a rare example. For most of us, what we really need to focus on is ourself, our family. And I use that term a little bit loosely because most of the time it's the family that we choose because of the nature of indoctrination and the way it splits up our family. Sometimes we don't have an option, you know. But yeah. Our kindred, certainly, which would be the accumulations of a few different families locally, you know, where you guys all see each other often.
Yeah.
Those bonds are the ones that will develop and become unbreakable. And those are also the bonds that will be shown to teach by example to the future generations. The kid who grow up with a kindred of a few families and they understand and experience these tight bonds. You know, the only versions of that we have in our contemporary world is like the Amish, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So that has to improve in the future. It's so critical. People, heathens who don't understand this kindred thing, and most of them don't, they need to get their head wrapped around it, because really the very survival of our ancient way is dependent on them developing themselves, their families, and their kindreds. And that, like I said, that's why I focus the attention there.
Right. And you know, in as I was saying, you know, I heard that from Derek Bros at an actual conference, and you know, that's a perfect example of that, because you're gathering like minds, people who believe in the same thing, like in actual truth and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Those people are, like you said, they're chosen family. I call like soul family. I like that word.
Yeah, sure.
And that's definitely a direction that Brian and I are talking a lot about for future projects regarding the Wizard Factory, is organizing conferences and retreats and things like that, where people are connecting in the real world. They're having a visceral, memorable, and powerful, profound experience in reality. And that's going to be so much more than watching like a webinar or something like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, those things are great and they have their usefulness, but it's like, especially in the context of all the censorship, dude, I mean, unless they have SWAT team in their gay little stormtrooper outfits or whatever, like, you know, they're not going to stop that, you know, like people will show up because people care more and more about freedom, especially people like us. You know, of course, yes, there's the divergence, but we're starting to get fired up. We're starting to get passionate and starting to really organize and seek people out in real life to connect with, because we're tired of feeling alone and isolated. And that's something that we really feel a calling to try to meet that need and be problem solvers in that regard, and make ways for people to connect that way. It's very important.
There is nothing that you can do in social media that will take the place of screaming matches, tears, fist fights, and hugs. And all that shit can only happen in person, you know?
That's true.
You know, we work out. I mean, think about it. All the, you know, one of the things about social media that I love so much is how, you know, some dipshit living in mama's basement can get on there and talk to me the way that, you know, they do. And other people, like I know some combat veterans that are really awesome, highly intelligent people. And, you know, they've got like some 21-year-old shitbird that's never left his hometown, and they're talking shit to him, right? Well, that kid's never going to learn anything about respect from that example. And we learn to respect each other and appreciate each other and understand each other in person. That's how we do it, you know? So the social media things and all that kind of stuff is really great for us to develop certain connections and to learn who's out there and all that kind of stuff, but it will never, ever take the place of face-to-face anything.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree with you guys more, man. That 100.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the digital version of a city, right? It's that high, it's anonymity. You know, that's what you get is like you can be an asshole and cut people off in traffic because, well, they don't know who you are. They're never going to see you again, and you essentially never have the consequences, you know, coming to you. I mean, I'm sure that
That's a perfect.
eventually it's going to catch up to you, but it's definitely on a long delay.
Yeah.
And so some keyboard warrior just sitting there like thinking he's clever, talking shit to you.
Yeah.
He's not gonna. I guarantee he wouldn't be saying that to you, to your face. For sure.
And that whole concept of reality is just lost because of some of the things that we're allowing to happen within our culture. And so healing it has everything to do with our small village type communities coming together and becoming strong.
Yeah, remembering the tribe. And that's, like I said, that's really a central goal and mission here at the Wizard Factory for sure.
There's some folks leading the way on that, like the Wolves of Vinland, you know. Paul Wagner in his writing is motivating people to start moving in the right direction. These guys we've got a lot of good guys out there doing this.
Yeah.
You know, we're doing good. You guys are doing good stuff. I'm doing good stuff. We're moving in the right direction.
It's happening. Yeah, it's happening. And that's the thing. Anybody who's standing on the sidelines, like, get to work or get out of the way. I mean, that's really what.
Yeah, man.
Like, it is a time for. It's a time for action right now. Like, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're in the way, you know. Okay, you're not in the way anymore. Cool. Let's move on. You know? Nothing to it. But yeah, it's
so. Yeah, I think I feel good about everything that we've covered tonight. I think that's a pretty distinct idea that we've covered now. The past, the present, and now where our mindset is moving forward in a time where action is absolutely crucial. And so, really, the bottom line is get in touch with people, connect, find your tribe, and start doing something, because it doesn't just start with, oh, yeah, you're on Facebook, right? Like, cool. So what do we do now? Like, you know, you're gonna have a conversation, and then you're gonna like start coming up with ideas, and we could do this and we could do that, and that's where the magic really happens. So,
remembering how to be social for real. You know?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep, that's it.
So one last time, Sean, tell the viewers how they can find you.
Yeah, you guys can find me. The two primary ways to find me are on Norse Pagan Shaman Facebook page. That's my work page. And then the other another great place to find me is on the Patreon page. It's Norse Pagan Shaman at Patreon. And a website's forthcoming, and we're just about to launch the YouTube stuff. So, you know, I'll keep you guys posted on all that. But for right now, those are the two best ways to reach me. And that's it.
Nice.
Excellent. And on our end, for anyone who hasn't visited the website yet, it's still fairly new. So check out thewizardfactory.com. We've got a lot of great stuff up on there, pretty much a one-stop shop for everything that we have going on. And also, definitely on the home page, there's a link for the initiation package. So anyone that hasn't done that, I highly recommend it. It's a free, awesome, it's pretty much premium content that we put together, a video series, and made it absolutely free. You just put in your, sign up for the email, and you get the link right there immediately. And that's a really good place to actually get started. Speaking of action, like, that's where it starts, is drawing the circle, speaking to the ancestors, getting that support from your ancient family, and working with the runes and all that kind of stuff. We also recently did a 3-part rune series on the channel, so just go to our videos section and check those out. Highly recommend it.
Awesome.
And so really good segment. Again, thank you, Sean Black, for joining us. It's been a really interesting conversation, and we'd love to do more of this sometime, maybe.
Anytime, man. You guys reach out to me. It was an absolute pleasure to be on with you guys tonight. And this has been a pretty cool series. I hope it's received well. And thank you so much for having me on, guys. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Appreciate you
been
being
fun,
on.
man, for sure. So yeah, don't forget to click subscribe so you can see our videos every week. We got new episodes. Make sure you click the notification bell as well so you get that little notification. Friday nights we put new stuff up. Like the video so it helps spread the message and get this seen by more people. We really appreciate that very much. And thanks for watching. So until next week, be empowered, be inspired, and be encouraged.
Walk with the ancestors, folks.